I'll make this video real quick for you. I'm going to tell you about password security. Everybody knows passwords are a tough problem, right? A lot of people want to ditch the password and head for biometrics, fingerprint scans, those kind of things. Those kind of things are subject to hacking. People can steal your digital identity and then use it for themselves through an injection, right? They inject your fingerprint into their machine and make it appear that you're at their machine. Same with the face and everything else. They can spoof a machine into believing that it's you and not them. And those things are good, and as they always say, use multi-factor authentication. For me, I believe the password is very reliable as long as you establish good passwords. And people give you clues. It has to have uppercase, lowercase, special symbols. It has to be unique, not the same as any other password you use for your other accounts, email, banking, whatever. You want to use a unique one, especially when you're doing something that involves your identity, your money, your business, something like that. And a small business owner can't afford a lot of security experts, things like that. So, password creation is sometimes a challenge for somebody who doesn't have a strong math background or engineering background. Those people in computer science, engineering, and math, they know some tricks and they don't always tell you. Sometimes they want to sell something to you. When you work for an agency like the National Security Agency, people come in and they create passwords for you that are strong, and they teach you techniques to create and use passwords that will keep their system secure, either in their facilities, at your home, or other places you go. You learn good security principles as well as techniques to keep your system secure, whether it's their system or yours. And that kind of tradecraft is not something you can learn everywhere. That's why a lot of people go to NSA during their college years for an internship. They get a good clearance that lasts a lifetime if they don't screw up, you know. If they don't, start getting diarrhea mouth where they talk too much. Loose lips sink ships is another way, it's a more polite way to say it. But if they don't get, to the point where they forgot the principles that kept their system safe and they don't use them anymore, once they get to that, then they need a refresher or they need to move on. But if you're running your own business at some point, you need to do all the things that you could do in a big agency like that, but on a much smaller budget with much fewer personnel, right? So one of the things I'm going to tell you about is the Rubik's Cube. And you have probably all heard of things like the Enigma machine from World War II. If you have any kind of history knowledge, you know that the Enigma machine was their cryptography equipment that the Nazis used to send secret messages to their submarine fleet, the Wolfpack, in the Atlantic. And so they have a machine, and you would type a message into it, and it would spit out an encrypted message, right? They call it ciphertext. You put in plain text, which is your message. It encrypts it into ciphertext. And on the other end, they have another one of those machines. They key it the way it's supposed to be keyed, and it spits back out the plain text message they need to read. So they say, move to this position and sink this ship. And so they key in their key, and then it spits out the message they need, and they tell the captain, and the captain maneuvers his boat to the position he needs to maneuver to sink a merchant marine ship or a battleship or whatever that's headed for England or Europe. And that was one of the key turning points in the World War II, was to secure the Atlantic in some respects. By cracking the Enigma machines, we could figure out a little bit about their submarine maneuvers. The Wolfpack needed the Enigma machine, and there are some old ladies that cracked that machine during World War II. They weren't old then, they're golden girls now. And what I would tell you is a Rubik's Cube can be used in the same fashion that an Enigma machine is used. It doesn't have a keyboard, but it has, on a standard 3x3 cube, you have 3 rows of 3, right? And there are 6 sides, so there's 9 squares on each side. Times 6, you have 54 little different squares. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't have a cube right here. I'm trying to imagine for you, and it seems about right. 3, 6, 9 times 6 is 54, right? 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times 6 is 54. About right. So you have this little thing that can have a lot of combinations, right? And you could use one of those sides for a combination, or 2 of them, to generate a password, right? And you could either jumble it and then use 1 side or 2 sides or 3 sides for your password, and you would just need to convert those color designs into that pattern into something useful in terms of a password. And there are people who just use it that way. It's just real simple. They could tape it into position so it doesn't move, and then solve it each time they needed to, or they lock it up so nobody touches it. But that seems a little risky. But if you're using 2-factor authentication, you could reset your password with another cube or something, or another jumble. And the way you would do that is like if you had a yellow square in the upper left corner, you would need to orient it. And a lot of people, they always orient with the white down. They start by doing a white cross on the bottom, and then they point the white down, solve for the corners. All the white corners are solved. And then they have a row around the bottom. The bottom layer is completely solved. And then the center is solved. The center of every cube is always solved because it's what you're going to solve onto. You're going to bring pieces from other parts of the cube, so they're all oriented with that centerpiece. So if this centerpiece is yellow, then you've got to put the 8 pieces around it, the 3 on the bottom, 3 on the top, and the 2 middle pieces, so that you have all yellow on that face. And so what you get is, let's say you have a face and it starts out orange, and then blue and green, and then red and yellow and white, white. Orange, green, blue, red, yellow, and white. So orange, you could do OR, and you could do it like the periodic table, an uppercase and a lowercase. Orange, blue, blue, green, so you have BL, and you have GR, and then red, yellow, and white or something, so RE, WH, and it's yellow and white, so YE, and then WH. And the other thing you could do is, like on centerpieces, the very center of the face, you could do first and last letter. So instead of YE for yellow, you could do YW, right? And then you'd have YW, and then an uppercase W and a lowercase h for the white. And that could be a partial password. You could do all 9 and you would have a password. There are other ways to use the cube that are more complicated that involve solving the cube. You have a jumbled cube, and say you're working in a secure facility and they hand you a cube or they hand you pictures of a cube, and you put them in your briefcase, you fly around the world, and you walk into another office. Say it's a consulting firm, a banking firm, something, where you need to put in a password so they know it's you. In addition to all your biometrics and everything, they want you to have the password. And the way you do it is you memorize the algorithm to solve the cube. Where do you get that? Well, they're available online, and they'll show you certain moves. They start with solve for a white cross and orient it downward. Then solve for all the corner pieces. And there's like 3 moves to solve for corner pieces. Basically, they orient the cube and they tell you the top is the top face. Then you have a right face and a left face, a bottom and a rear. And you start with the one move for moving a piece from the top right corner down to the bottom right corner is to turn the right face once, clockwise once. Then what is it? Turn the top clockwise once and then turn it back once, and that'll bring that piece down. And if it's in the right place, the white needs to be what? On the top or on the right or on the front. There's only 3 places it can be. That's why there's 3 moves, right? So if you do one of the moves, the right move, it'll move it down. And you could label each move in your algorithm as A, B, and C. But you would need to know that those are the lower white corner pieces, right? So LWC, lower white corner, right? And those 3, so with LWC1, LWC2, and LWC3 could be your 3 moves, right? And so you could go WC1, because the lower is kind of, just the orientation tells you what it is. It's a white corner 1, white corner 2, white corner 3. You use those algorithms and you record each move you make to solve the cube. And orientation is important, right? Because the first part is building the cross, and if you don't do that right, then you miss some moves, right? And your move order will be wrong. So you need a real good algorithm that shows you how to build a cross and how to bring the pieces down in a way that you can record the moves. And some people would just give you one that has a cross on the bottom. This would be like a guy who builds passwords for you. You have to memorize the algorithm, record your moves from the cross to a solved cube, and then translate those recorded moves into the plain text you need for a password, right? So you have to decipher a move, you have to correlate a move with a code, right? So lower white corner, or white corner, WC, for the one that is connected to a red and an orange or something. That might give you one code, right? And you do them in order, right? You have to do the one that's red and orange, blue and green, and what is it? There's orange, blue, and green. And you have to do the 2 that correspond. There's 4 corners. So you have to kind of do them in order. But what I say is you'll have a bunch of moves, right? And then you have to record your moves and generate a password from those moves. And that password has to match the password that's been assigned to you for your username or your account, right? Now, there are a lot of ways to generate passwords, and a Rubik's Cube is not for everybody. Can be very challenging if you use the actual algorithm to solve a password. There are a lot of places you can make a mistake and do it in the wrong order. And, if you don't have really good spatial judgment, logic, and reasoning, you're going to screw it up and you're not going to open your account. But if you're really bright, you went to MIT, Stanford, Caltech, something like that, and studied math or physics, you probably won't have a problem figuring it out because you got a 1600 on your SAT, and what I told you made a lot of sense, that a Rubik's Cube is nothing more than a piece of cryptography equipment if you know how to apply cryptography principles to it. And you could develop your own system if you have that kind of crypto engineering kind of gift. That you didn't need to listen to me tell you how to do it. You went to a good school, you're really bright, and you really know how to create your own system. And that's going to be better than anything I can create for you. If you don't have that kind of gift, then you're going to need someone to help you. And that's why you hire somebody who's really bright to help you solve riddles like that, so that you don't lock yourself out of your accounts, but your system is secure from hackers and thieves who want to install ransomware, who want to crash your system because they don't like what you say on Twitter, who want to look at you nude or whatever it is. You want to have good cryptography. Everybody knows what the threats are, but not everybody knows how to solve the problems. And there are other ways you can do it. I mean, if you know something that other people don't know, usually that's a good password, right? So the solution to a Rubik's Cube, they don't know how to solve the cube, and if you hide the cube in a black bag or in a briefcase or something and they don't get to look at it, they can't solve it either. And they don't know what your algorithm is for solving it. They don't know what order to solve it in, which face to solve first. So it's important to say like white, orange, red, blue, green, yellow, right? And that would be your order. And if you solved it white, green, blue, orange, red, and you wouldn't solve it in the right order, you would have the wrong password generated from your solution. So it's important to do it in the right order, and every piece has to be in the right order. And then you can get the solution you need to generate a password. Some people would only solve partial cubes, They say, well, I don't need a very long password, but I need it to be solid to where it's not written down and I can solve for it, right? And that's a basic piece of cryptography equipment that people think you're just playing with a toy. And as long as you have a picture of it, you can always recreate the cube. You can put it back together. You can take it apart and put it back together. The pieces pop out, and you can pop them into any order you want them in. So if you have a picture of every face, then you can put it back together in the same jumble that it was in and solve it the way it's supposed to be. Then you need to memorize the algorithm and the code, right? So you need to know what each move is in terms of your code. Is it an A? Is it a B? Is it a C? Is it a 1? Is it a 2? Is it a 3? Right? So right, and then reverse, counterclockwise, clockwise, top, and then counterclockwise, right. What is that move? That can be a 1, or that can be an A1. Whatever you want. I mean, if it's those 3 moves, there's A1, A2, A3, right? You go down to the next set of moves, there's 5 of them. You go A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, right? Or B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, right? And you go, each level you go down to solve until you get to the end where you're moving yellow pieces around to get them into position. you get to like F or G, G or H, right? It might only be like 10, what is there, about 10 sets of moves or something. And each move would have a letter and a number associated with it. And each letter and number would correspond to a piece of your password. They could directly correspond, like J10, or they could be each one of those could correspond to something in a code book or something. But anyways, you will solve your puzzle and then generate a code, and from that code you could generate you could look things up in a code book. There's a bunch of ways to do it. Then there's other things you can use too, like if you don't like the Rubik's Cube because it's too difficult, think of something like your middle school and what was across the street from your middle school. Well, they might have tore the building down and you think, oh, that was so horrible. I wish it was still there. Well, it's good that it's not there anymore in terms of your password. Why? Because it's not on Google Earth either. It might be in some Chinese cryptographer's Google Earth, but not everyone can access those data files to know what old buildings, what old businesses were there. Because, there was a pizza place there, then there was a barbecue joint, and then there was an ice cream store and a liquor store, and you didn't like the ice cream store and the liquor store, but you could say, in this year or in this grade, right, you could, infer what was across the street from my middle school. You don't have to name the middle school. You just say, my middle school in the 5th grade, what was across the street? And you'd say, Jenny's Ice Cream, right? Or Baskin Robbins, right? And your password could be Baskin Robbins, and you have to know how to key that in. Are you just going to put in all lowercase Baskin and all lowercase Robbins, or are you going to put uppercase B, lowercase Askins, and uppercase R and lowercase Obbins, right? So there's different things you can do with that too. You can take the B and the R uppercase, put them together, and put Askins Obbins as the other part, right? So you just kind of, sometimes the B is bonded to the Baskins and the R is bonded to the Robbins. And when you think about chemistry, you want to break that bond for your reaction. And that was how you remember your password. It's Baskin Robbins, but I jumbled it a little so that I would make it tougher for people to figure out. And then there are people who are very gifted at math and engineering and physics, and they know how to do things like wave equations and heat equations that most people who go to college do not understand. And they never get to that level unless they went to really good schools like Caltech and MIT and other places, sometimes like Georgia Tech or something like that, and study physics or nuclear engineering or something, and they understand what a wave equation is and a heat equation. In that case, you might want to use one of those things, right? Because you can solve an equation. Some equations, as some of you know, there's more than one solution to some equations, and sometimes there's no solution, right? And if you had one equation with no solution, you could put NS as your solution, as your password. That would be the first part of your password. Then you solve for another equation that had two solutions, right? Kind of like a quadratic equation where you have a plus and a minus, so you get two roots. Well, in some kinds of equations, you could probably have more than one solution. You could use the numbers that are generated for the solution as correlations to letters in the alphabet or numbers in the periodic table, right? And the numbers in the periodic table correspond to elements, right? So number 1 would be H, so your password would start with H. number 2, you'll get either a 4 or a 2 or something, and you'll get the what is it? You start with hydrogen, then you get the He for helium, right? And you come back and get some more, right? And you go all the way, and you could constrain it. You say, I only want to go to carbon 12 because I'm a carbon 12 life form, right? Or you could use the whole table, that might involve memorizing the table or just looking it up to solve your password. But you solve an equation, then you punch in the numbers, and the numbers can correlate to the alphabet, to the periodic table, or to some other table that involves letters or numbers or something. Like a z-score on a cumulative distribution. If you had some numbers that went from 0 to 2.5 or something, and 2.66 or whatever, and you could figure out how many standard deviations it was closest to when you solve these equations. You could figure out the cumulative percentage, and you could use that as part of your password. There's people who use math as the point. And the more you know about math, the more complicated you can make it. But you need to make sure that you don't confuse yourself. And if you're not the kind of person who can solve the same problem over and over the same way, then you might want to steer clear of those things too. Rubik's Cube is one way. The math is another way. And partial differential equations, that's good. You're not going to get your password cracked by anybody but a physicist or a mathematician. And some of the people would have a little bit more respect for you if, they're making $150,000 out of college. They're not going to sit there and crack your password so they can steal $50 out of your PayPal account. But, there are people on the other side of the world who know how to do those things, and they don't make $150,000 a year, and they'd steal $50 from you if they could figure out what you were doing. So you don't want to talk about too much what you're doing in terms of password.